Let's talk about money. For most of us, it's not just about dollars and cents or numbers on a screen. It's about these really deep, powerful, and honestly, often hidden emotions. So we're going to dive into a story that really pulls back the curtain on how much our feelings drive our financial lives and how a moment of total crisis can sometimes lead to incredible clarity.
And this is where it all begins. It's a feeling I bet so many of us can relate to, right? That tension around the kitchen table about money. Those quiet, angry voices you'd overhear from your bedroom. That feeling that something just wasn't right. This isn't just a passing memory. For the person in our story, it was the seed that grew into a financial reality that would take decades to finally understand.
So just for a second, let's pause and think about this. What are your very first memories of money? Were they calm, maybe even educational? Or were they tense, emotional? Because believe it or not, those early experiences can write a kind of script for us, a script we end up following for years without even realizing it.
For the author whose story we're following, one of those early memories led to this silent but life-altering promise she made to herself. This is the story of that vow.
Okay, so picture this. It was one of those rare, happy moments. Her mother comes home just beaming, holding up this beautiful yellow sweater she found for a total bargain. They're literally dancing around the living room. But then her father gets home, and the joy just gets sucked out of the room. He looks at the sweater and says, flatly, "You're still over budget." And her mom just deflated, shrank away in tears.
And wow, the impact of that moment was huge. At just 5 years old, seeing her mother's shame, she made a secret vow. This promise, to be so independent that she'd never, ever need anyone's approval for her money choices, it became the driving force of her entire life, her silent mission. But life, has a funny way of testing our most deeply held beliefs. So let's jump to the next chapter and see what happened when this childhood vow collided head-on with the realities of being an adult. Okay, this slide really lays out the conflict, doesn't it? In one column, you have the vow, fierce independence, total control, no more fear. And then you have reality, marriage, shared finances, and that vow to have total control. Well, her husband was the one managing their investments. And that promise to escape fear? Nope. It was still there, this secret, nagging worry that they just wouldn't have enough. And then came the first major crack in the foundation. One day, she walks in and finds her husband about to put a massive, completely unexpected tax bill on a credit card. $25,000. It was just a moment of absolute shock. It felt like a total betrayal of the financial security she was trying so hard to build. All that fury and disappointment, it pretty quickly turned into action. After the fight, they came to a new arrangement. She would take charge. From now on, she was going to be the one to mastermind their money, to finally fulfill that childhood vow of control. So she dove in head first. And remember, this was the 90s, the height of the tech boom. She hired a new advisor who was all about tech stocks. She even admits she got caught up in the greed for the upside, watching her portfolio just soar, on paper at least. Everything seemed to be going perfectly until March of 2000. And then it all came crashing down. The tech bubble burst. She was just frozen, completely paralyzed by fear and shame as she watched all that hard-won independence just evaporate. The loss was huge, and it sent her into a deep depression that lasted for a year and a half. Her passion had boomeranged right back at her as pain. This was her absolute lowest point. But sometimes it's right there in the depths of a crisis that we find the most profound clarity. This part of the story, it's the turning point. After months and months of feeling stuck, one morning, something just shifted. In the simple, totally mundane act of taking a shower, the dam just broke. All the grief, all the shame, all the pain she'd been holding in just came pouring out. It was this huge cathartic moment that finally released the paralysis and sparked this new, intense energy to figure out what on earth had just happened. And that new energy led her to this incredible, emerging field that finally gave her a name for what she'd been through: behavioral economics. It's basically the study of how real, messy, emotional human beings, that's us, actually make decisions, especially with money. It mixes psychology with economics to get a much more realistic picture.
And this right here is the absolute game changer. See, traditional economics assumes we're all perfectly logical robots, always making the rational choice. But behavioral economics just flips that idea on its head. It proves what she had just lived through so painfully. When it comes to money, we are anything but rational. We're driven by fear, by greed, by those old emotional wounds from childhood.
What's so amazing is that her personal journey of discovery was happening right alongside this bigger professional one. The whole field of financial therapy started to grow, with new associations popping up to help people with the exact sticky business of money that she had been wrestling with. She had found her calling. She knew she had to help other people untangle their own emotional money stories. So, after all that struggle, all that learning, what was the big takeaway? Well, it led to a completely new definition of wealth, one that goes so far beyond the numbers in your bank account. Let's take a look at the framework she came up with. She calls it holistic wealth. And what's so fascinating is that the original meaning of the word wealth actually comes from an Old English word for well-being. It was never supposed to be just about money. True wealth, real wealth, is about this sense of overall well-being, and it's held up by a few key pillars.
And here they are. These are the pillars. And notice something really important. Financial well-being is just one of the four. It's supported by our physical, our psychological, and our spiritual health. They all have to work together to create a life that's balanced, productive, and actually fun to live.
Okay, let's make this real. Physical well-being? It can be as simple as getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Psychological? That's about having genuine connections with other people. Spiritual well-being is about making sure your life lines up with your core values. And financial well-being? Yeah, it's about the numbers, but it's really about understanding the beliefs that drive your choices, just like that childhood vow. So why does all this matter so much? Well, because if one of these pillars is out of whack, it throws everything else off balance. For example, if you're constantly exhausted and sleep-deprived, are you really going to make sharp financial decisions? Probably not. If you're feeling anxious or alone, no amount of money in the bank is ever going to feel like enough. You can't fix an emotional problem with a financial solution. And this brings us to the final, powerful realization of our entire journey. After the childhood vow, after the market crash, after all the years of learning, she finally arrived at this simple, profound truth. It's not about chasing some magic number in your portfolio. It's about recognizing your own worth and finding peace in knowing that what you have and who you are is already enough.